Hello and welcome to the episode of In the Trench with Gangrene. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today we are joined by a very special guest, very well-known Jets fan, podcaster, YouTuber, Matt O'Leary. Thanks for coming on, and how you doing?
Yeah, doing pretty good. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a little tougher on these Mondays after a
Yeah,
loss, though. I can tell you that much.
yeah. I'd much rather victory Mondays over these, misery Mondays or whatever you want to call it. Um, with that being said, we'll get right into it here. Obviously a tough loss yesterday. So many. You were saying it. Prior to the show here, so many missed opportunities. Fall down early, come back, blow it late. I guess I'll start off with your thoughts on the performance yesterday, your thoughts on the game, the final play on defense, 4th and inches, 51-yard touchdown, solid clock management. So many things went wrong. I guess you kind of just your thoughts in the game as a whole yesterday and what went wrong for the Jets.
Yeah, there was really a lot that I thought went wrong for this team. There were a lot of opportunities on the table for them, and just a few that you rattled off there on 4th and inches, giving up a 51-yard touchdown is inexcusable. I think the linebackers were a little out of position there and bit hard,
Mhm.
going after the run, and then the punt to start the game where you have a Braden Mann punting from his own end zone, kicks a line drive
Yep.
right to the middle of the field. That can't happen. You have to try to get it one with some arc on it so that your gunners have time to get down the field and make a play, but also towards the sideline. Too many times he's punting in the middle of the field and it ends up bouncing in the end zone or just
Mhm.
too much of a line drive punt, and then that sets up bad field position. I'm not sure what Robert Saleh was doing at the end of the game there. They had a first down to Garrett Wilson with about 45, 48 seconds left, somewhere around
Yep.
that. And elected not to take a timeout and try to get up to the line and get another playoff. And they ended the game on a 58-yard field goal attempt with a timeout in their pocket. That just seems like a little bit of a waste. And then you get to the quarterback play. I just don't think it was consistent enough. There were some nice moments from him, and there were some also pretty dreadful moments from Zach Wilson. And you really got to see both the good, the bad, and the ugly from him yesterday. So I think really all those things really culminated into the loss.
Yeah, I totally agree. Even, you brought it up too. The Braden Mann punt, he had a bad day yesterday. He's had a really poor season. Ever since the injury last year, he's not been the same player. And you nailed it right on the head. The one timeout, you're not going to be able to save that for Thursday night against Jacksonville. You gotta utilize your timeouts. They could have had another 10, 15 seconds left. You could have had another one or two plays. And as you mentioned, 58-yard field goal. You could have made that a 45, 40-yarder if you had more time. You touched on it there with Zach. Wasn't great, wasn't perfect. It wasn't his worst performance ever. The New England performance, two New England performances were a lot worse. The pick to start the half definitely hurt team to kind of hurt the momentum of the offense a little bit there, especially, going down and getting points before the half. I guess take a deeper dive into, his performance yesterday and what went wrong. What did you like and what didn't you like?
Yeah, so there were a lot of splash plays or big plays. Like he
Mhm.
completed the rollout to the left and throw across to the right side to Uzama for the
Yep.
40-yard touchdown. The big throw to Garrett Wilson right before that to set it up. The throw before the half to Jeff Smith. Heck, even on that final drive, there were some really nice throws to Garrett Wilson
Mhm.
on a third and
Yep.
long to continue the drive. But for really whatever reason, it seemed like, you know, a tale of two halves. He comes out in
Yep.
the second half, has that really bad interception, and then in pretty much the rest of that third quarter, it looked like he went back into the shell. I think he got too conservative. I thought
Mhm.
LaFleur got a little
Yep.
conservative as well when they probably should have attacked down the field as they were, they're stacking the box and daring the Jets to throw on him. But just too many open reads and open throws that he just whiffed on. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, those flashy plays are nice, but you need to be able to do the little stuff and the little things consistently, which he just has not been able to do.
Yeah, I agree. It's the plays where it seems as if when he has more time to think, he struggles, and it's the plays where he's on the run when he is not thinking as much and he can kind of just put some air under it. He's a lot better. Um, to even talk more about Zach, do you think he is the guy on Thursday against Jacksonville, or do you think Mike White's back? Or I think it's more of just a matter of Mike White being ready. But do you see him rolling out there Thursday night?
I do. I don't see how on a short week Mike White's going to be able to get cleared to play against Jacksonville. I think that's a really tough ask. And if he wasn't able to play on Sunday, I don't know how that really changes in just a couple of days. I think maybe you have a chance to see him against Seattle. You have
Yeah.
almost a mini bye week after this game on Thursday, but
Mhm.
I would expect to see Zach Wilson. I think he needs to be better in order for them to win this game and keep their season alive.
Yep. Do you see a scenario where, let's say, and we know, we all understand they got to win 3 straight, but do you see a scenario where if they lose on Thursday, they roll with Zach the final 2 games because they won't mean a whole lot to see what they got in them if they fall to 7 and 8, or do you think they'll go back to Mike White if he's ready for Seattle?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think, that's got to be on the table to just, let it play out and let,
Mhm.
Zach kind of just take it from there and not, potentially re-injure Mike White. I mean, this is an excuse for Zach Wilson, but the offensive line has struggled, especially
Yep.
with all the injuries. So, I mean, I think if even when White does come back in, he's going to take his shots, and with busted ribs, that's not a very nice feeling. So maybe kind of just preserve him. But honestly, I think unless there's going to be some sort of massive haul for like an Aaron Rodgers or something like that, I think
Mhm.
we're coming down the road to a Mike White and Zach Wilson quarterback competition this summer to see who's the guy going into 2023.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I would like to see that because Zach, and we've all kind of mentioned it this season. He kind of just got given the job. He didn't have to earn anything coming here. He kind of just it was given to him really, and it he hasn't played up to the number 2 overall pick that we expected him to be. So moving on from Zach, you talked a little about Michael Floor. Before we get to the rest of the position players and the rest of the offense, your thoughts on Mike LaFleur this year? Similar to Zach, was a rookie offensive coordinator last season. We were hoping to see, this season the offense really flow. He's had a lot of questionable play calls. I think we can all agree on that. Your thoughts on, him this season? I think a lot of people go down to the first thing or the goal line against Minnesota where, there was a questionable play calling there. But your thoughts on Mike LaFleur this season?
Yeah, I almost feel like there's a big portion of Jet fans that use him as a scapegoat. And, that's
Mhm.
not to say he gets a free pass on anything. I think he absolutely deserves some criticism for his play call. But
Mhm.
I think people use him as a crutch for why Zach Wilson
Yep.
isn't playing that well, which I don't necessarily think is fair on him. Are there times where you could, critique some of the play calling? You brought up the example of down in the red zone. Yeah, absolutely. He's still a young play caller and he hasn't been perfect. But, for instance, the game against Minnesota, did he get too cute in the red zone? Of course, but they still had nearly 500 yards of offense in that game.
Mhm.
There were times where they looked really good offensively, just not consistent enough. I don't think he's in jeopardy for losing his job. That's not to
Mhm.
say that he's the next Kyle Shanahan. I think just overall he's been fine. And we can live with that going forward.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. He's had some questionable moments, but it's also about the offense going out there and executing. Zach has missed a couple throws to open receivers where would have been big gains. So now we take a look at the rest of the roster. We'll go back to the quarterback here and Mike White and been a wild year at the quarterback spot with Flacco, then Wilson and Mike White. Now back to Zach. We saw Flacco in Buffalo, which was not fun. But your thoughts on Mike White in the 3 games that he's played this season?
I was impressed with Mike White. I really didn't have very high expectations. I think what we saw in the 3 games this year, he looks like a completely different guy than what we saw even over the summer in
Yep.
preseason. I thought he really struggled in training camp in the preseason, and honestly, they're probably at the time they could have made a case to cut him and move
Yep.
on from him, but thankfully they didn't. He stuck around, and obviously he's drastically improved. He doesn't have the physical tools that Zach does, but he has much more pocket awareness. He could read the field better, and he makes the easy things easy, where Zach is making the easy things very hard on himself right now. So I think it's pretty clear that White's been better of the two so far this year, and I think if healthy, he deserves to play. But I've been very, very impressed with what we've seen from Mike White.
Yeah, I agree. He's put us in a position all 3 games to win each of those games, and obviously, we've been 1 and 2, but quarterback win-loss record doesn't mean a ton. He's been awesome, and I guess my to kinda add on to that, do you feel like the locker room has bought into Mike White more than they have Zach Wilson? Zach Wilson's comments after the New England game definitely set some in the locker room off. But do you get that feeling that the locker room's kind of more bought in, more so like trusts Mike White than Zach?
I hear that and I see that a lot, and I think to an extent it's true, but I don't think it's necessarily as big of a deal as some are making it.
Mhm.
The team is rallied around Mike White. I think that's obvious, and they function better on offense when he is in compared to Zach Wilson. But
Yeah.
uh, and then that's not to take anything away from the locker room's reaction to Zach's comments after the Patriots game. He handled it terribly, and they had every
Mhm.
right to be upset. But CJ Uzama, who's a vocal leader of the offense, is
Yeah.
kind of supported Zach throughout all of this. There was a video that Otis Livingston put out on Twitter of Garrett Wilson and Zach Wilson talking after the game, and he was saying that, that they're behind him and that they'll lift him up and stuff like that, and they had a missed
Mhm.
opportunity. But I don't think it's anything personal. Like I see that
Mhm.
there's so many takes where it's like, oh, the Jets just hate playing for Zach Wilson. I don't know if that's necessarily
Yeah.
true, but I just think they respect how nice of a guy that Mike White is and how gutsy his performances have been, which is, I think, fair.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And some of the big hits Mike White took, and specifically in that Bills game with the ribs, has definitely earned a lot of respect. But I totally agree. I don't think there's any like hatred for Zach. I think it's just Mike White's earned a lot of respect, and he's kind of the hot hand right now at quarterback. So moving on from the quarterback position, now we go to the running back, which is in a way too kind of been a moving part this season. Where beginning of the season, Brees was amazing. He goes down in Denver. You get James Robinson. He's been inactive, a couple weeks here. But Bam Knight, out of the middle of nowhere, you bring him up. He showed a lot of promise in training camp. He's been very good. The run game yesterday couldn't get going, but prior to that, the run game was really solid the past couple weeks. Your thoughts on Bam Knight and Michael Carter, and do you see a situation where next season Brees and Bam are the 1-2 punch instead of Brees and Michael Carter?
Yeah, I definitely think that has to be on the table because I think for whatever reason, Bam Knight's just been better than Michael Carter this
Mhm.
season. I think Carter struggled. But this offense and really the running game in particular hasn't looked the same since Brees Hall went down. Losing
Yeah,
Elijah Vera Tucker hurt a lot too,
yeah,
obviously. But I think the three of them will stick. Like, I don't think Michael Carter is cut or traded or anything like that.
mhm,
I think it'll be those three guys, but there's absolutely a world where Bam Knight can overtake Michael Carter for the
mhm.
second running back job. And honestly, coming off an ACL, you're going to ease Brees Hall back into it. You're not going to give him like this monster workload coming off an injury like that. So you're going to need both those guys behind him.
Yeah, I agree. To kind of touch upon James Robinson, why don't you think he has played like why do you think he hasn't played much of a role this season? Since coming over at the trade deadline.
Yeah, I don't know. I was excited about that trade. I thought he was going to add a little bit of a different element. He's more of a bruising guy and he's good down on the goal line, but I
Mm,
think he's playing hurt or was at one point. He was banged up a little bit, but early on in this year, I thought he looked good with Jacksonville. He had a couple nice moments against the Bills in that Buffalo game earlier this year, but I don't know if it's just injury or what, but it doesn't feel like he's running at the same strength that he normally is. And that's kind of how I feel about Michael Carter too. I just feel like both those guys have nagging injuries and it's kind of showing.
mhm. Yeah, I agree. Carter missed the one game against or the one game due to a knee, and it seems as if he hasn't had that same burst since that. To kind of close it out, your thoughts on Brees, like, do you feel as if he'll come back next season the same, in a way, the same like explosiveness that he had earlier in this year?
I think it might take him a little bit, but I'm not necessarily worried like long term about Brees Hall. Like I said, maybe early on in the year you bring him on slowly, you don't give him that big of a role, and um, as the year goes on and as the knee starts to feel a little bit better, you could up his workload. But I think that's the benefit of having guys like Bam Knight and Michael Carter, who you could rely on when healthy to come in and play. But like long term, I'm not worried about Brees Hall. I think he's a very, very special player, and this is only the start for him.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited to see what he can do, and then to AVT coming back next season. So now moving on to the wide receivers, where Garrett Wilson's had a crazy good year. 34 yards away from 1,000 yards, beat Keyshawn's receiving record for rookie, beat Wayne Corbett's receptions record. He's done a lot of great things this season. Your thoughts on Garrett Wilson? And two, I guess we can get into his performance as well. yesterday where he had a couple big plays. Him and Zach connected, for a couple big chunk plays yesterday.
Yeah, I think he's been everything you want from a 10th overall pick. He's been stellar and, really come into his own. He put up production with Zach. He's put up production with Joe Flacco and Mike White. So it doesn't seem to matter who's in at quarterback. He's putting up really good numbers. And, as we just finished talking about Breece Hall, and he was on the fast track to Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Mhm.
But now I think Garrett Wilson very well could win that award with a few more big weeks to close out this season.
Yep.
Put up 1,000 yards is very challenging to do as a rookie. And just in general, the Jets haven't had a 1,000-yard receiver since Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker back in 2015. It's been a long time. So to see someone come in and have this kind of impact at a skill position group for the Jets is unheard of, but you got to love what you've seen from him.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it seems like, too, listening to some of his post-game press conferences, it seems like he's turning into a leader as well in the locker room, a guy that truly, wants to win and plays with a lot of energy. Now looking at the rest of the receiving core where, Elijah Moore requests to trade middle of the season. They don't trade him. He's been, involved a little bit more the past couple weeks at, obviously still not what we expected going into the season. Corey Davis, who, still is, been dealing with the injury issues, although it seems like he'll be back this week. Your thoughts on the rest of the receiving core? Denzel Mims included there as well. And even Jeff Smith yesterday made some plays. I thought he had the pass interference on him yesterday in the end zone before the half. But your thoughts on the other guys, too, that made an impact, and, Berrios as well, who's a little bit of a down season.
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed in Braxton Berrios. Had a really big year last year, but just not the same as a returner or as a receiver. Been very reliable at all this year. But as for some of the other receiving core, it feels like Elijah Moore is getting back on track. I love that he got a jet sweep this week. They've been giving those to
Yep.
Berrios. I think it makes a ton more sense to get him involved. Mims, before he got hurt in the game, came up with a catch, and I've kind of liked his step in the right direction this year. He's probably not the player that we thought we were getting out of Baylor, but
Yep.
looks like someone who could be a piece to this team, at least going forward for depth. Corey Davis has been, for me, really up and down. There's something he makes incredibly clutch catches, but he seems like once a week either has a drop or a penalty, and he's hurt a lot too. So I don't know if they end up bringing him back. But I think if your core or your main two are going to be Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson, I think you could have a pretty nice receiving core with those guys as your main focus.
Yeah, I agree. Do you see Corey Davis being here, much longer? And if not, do you see, possibility of Mims kind of taking more of a bigger role in the future?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely something that's on the table. I think they'll have to potentially add some more depth as well for next year if they lose some of these guys. But I think Denzel Mims actually absolutely can be a piece for depth going forward.
Yeah, I agree. And he's, a guy too that, tall, big receiver, strong, does a lot of good things. And he's had a tough time finding his footing here in the NFL, but he seems like this season's definitely been his most productive year by far. Now you go to the tight end spot where yesterday, Uzomah had his best day as a Jet by far with the 2 touchdowns. It's been disappointing for the most part. I feel like I would like to see them utilize a little bit more, but I want to hear your thoughts on Conklin and Uzomah. And do you feel as if they're using this year as a redshirt year for Rucker? And do you think we'll see more of Rucker next season?
Yeah, I really hope so. For Jeremy Rucker, I really hope so. I liked him coming out of Ohio State a lot. And obviously, with the 2 guys they signed in free agency in Conklin and Uzomah, they didn't necessarily need him to come in and play right away. But that's a really good blocker who I think is underrated as an athlete. So I would love to see him get involved next year. And as the 2 guys in front of him, I think Uzomah is a really good leader on this team. And I think he's been a little bit more productive over the last few weeks in the receiving game. Tyler Conklin's honestly disappointed me a little bit. I had high hopes for him, and I think he started the pretty good, but he's kind of fallen off after the last, maybe 5 weeks or so. So he's been a little disappointing to me. Too many drops, and it seems like he can't make a big contested catch when needed. So that's a little frustrating, but overall, I think the tight end room is pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. Conklin's, has had a lot of has had a lot of drops this season. One more thing. Do you feel as if they should be? I like the way they used Uzomah yesterday in the red zone. Do you feel as if they should utilize them more in the red zone, those close 10, 5 yard line, second down, third down situations if they get, stuffed the first two plays on the run?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that would absolutely be, worthwhile to do and work in there. I'm not opposed to that at all.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And as I mentioned, I like the way that they utilize Uzama yesterday. So now you go to the offensive line where we already talked about a little bit about the AVT injury, same game that Brees went down in Denver. It's been so many moving parts. It's been good, but the past 2 weeks, Buffalo, Mike White gets destroyed. And then yesterday, the run game could not get going whatsoever. I think they only had like 50 rushing yards or something like that. Your thoughts on the offensive line, and do you see them bouncing back after these past 2 weeks where they've really struggled?
I don't know. I think they're just too banged up right now, which is unfortunate. I think they came into the year with a pretty good unit, but just had a ton of injuries. It's going to be tough. They really struggled the last 2 weeks in particular.
Mhm.
Jacksonville's defense isn't phenomenal, so maybe it could be a get right spot for them. But I really think it's going to be a limp to the finish line with this unit just because of the amount of injuries they've sustained.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And do you see a guy like Lincoln Tomlinson? Do you see them possibly moving on? There's an possible out at the end of this year with in his contract. Do you see him on the roster next season? He's been for the amount of money we're giving him, he hasn't lived up to the full expectations I think we all gave him.
No, absolutely not. I think he's underwhelmed. I do think he comes back next year, though. I
Mhm.
don't think they want too many moving parts on the offensive line just because of the number of injuries that they've had. And I don't think that, there's you could have that much turnover and expect the line to gel. So I do think he ends up coming back. It's going to be a big year for him. He hasn't been great, obviously, but
Mhm.
I don't think they cut bait after 1 year.
Yeah, I tend to agree there. If you had right now, I know it's tough because there's so many things that could happen, but if you had to guess the starting offensive line week 1 next season, who is it, and is Becton included?
I don't think Becton is included. I really liked him as a rookie a lot. I think he showed a ton of promise, but just the injuries been back to back years is really, really tough for
Mhm.
him. I think Daniel Brown is going to come back and maybe a rookie offensive lineman is back in the mix. I think Max Mitchell has a real shot to be the starting right tackle next year. I think Lakin comes back at left guard. I think you need to re-sign Connor McGovern, and I think AVT comes back and moves back to right guard. I know he
Okay.
played both
Yeah.
left and right tackle, and kudos to him for doing that. But I think his best value is inside at guard, so I think they get him back inside. But I think they might look to add a tackle in the draft.
Okay, so you see them most likely move just letting Fant walk then?
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they brought back George Fant. He
Yeah.
hasn't really played that much this year to begin with, and wasn't really that effective when he did play. So I think that ship has kind of sailed.
Yeah, I tend to agree there too. I don't see Fant coming back next season. I would definitely be surprised there. All right, so now we move on to the defensive side of the ball where, yesterday it was just crushing to see, the 51-yard touchdown and 4th and inches, an opportunity to stuff them for the win. Um, I guess I'll start off with Jeff Ulbrich. He's definitely made a massive step in the right direction this season in terms of at the defensive coordinator spot. Your thoughts on the defense as a whole this week. I guess take away that play yesterday, but your thoughts on the defense as a whole.
Yeah, they've been really I mean, they've been great all year. They had that one lapse, and obviously that's gonna be the biggest story from the game against Detroit.
Yeah.
Still, though, they only gave up 13 points. The
Mhm.
other touchdown came on a special teams play.
Yeah.
So, for me, it was more of, like, they just had no margin of error with the offense playing that poorly, which is a little disappointing, but, it sucks that they gave up a big play. I think they really miss Quinnen Williams. He's trending in the right direction to play on Thursday, which would be
Yep.
great get back for this team because he has just been so dominant on the inside.
Yeah, I agree. We didn't have a sack yesterday, which definitely was tough, and it was evident that Golf had a lot of time in the pocket, and he delivered some big throws. Um, Before we get to the position groups and stuff, and Quinnen and all the other big playmakers on this defense, are you concerned at all with the lack of turnovers that they've forced the past couple weeks? The last one being against Chicago, which was the Mosley interception late in that game, which didn't mean a ton. But do you feel as if we want to have a chance to run the table here and win the next three, do you feel like they need to start forcing more turnovers?
Absolutely. I think that's what, really got this defense in gear in the first place is they had the big turnover game against Pittsburgh,
Yep.
with Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett in that one, and that I think kinda got them in gear and got them hot, but, yeah, they've really slowed down, and I don't know what it is, whether it's just getting back to creating pressure with Quinnen Williams back and forcing a quarterback into a mistake, but it's been kinda rough the last few weeks not being able to get either interceptions or, God forbid they fall on a fumble.
Yeah, I know. They don't do that. Um, I got so they're top 10 in basically every category, scoring, passing, all that good stuff. But why do you think it's been this season where like when their struggles have come, it's been in the run? Do you feel like it's been tackling, the missed tackles? Like, why do you feel their struggles have come in the run game this year, specifically yesterday? But obviously, Quinnen was out, which definitely plays a role.
Yeah, him being out obviously plays a role. I think they're just not consistent enough at linebacker and safety. I think they've had some nice moments from their linebacking core, whether it be, Mosley or Quan Alexander or Quincy Williams, who I think has gotten a lot better. But Quincy Williams isn't really a great tackler, and I think that comes into account sometimes. And he tends to over pursue or put
Mhm.
himself in a bad spot. Mosley's gotten caught a few times. Whitehead's not the best tackler, but I would say it has to do to the inconsistencies at the linebacker and safety position.
Yeah, I tend to agree there too. There's just a lot of missed opportunities in the run game and tackles and all that stuff. So now we go to the defensive line where we've talked all year long. Well, I guess I'll start off with this before we get to the rest of the defense line. We'll start off with Quinnen Williams. Your thoughts on his play this season, in a contract year, having a huge year. And do you feel like he should be in the conversation, at least in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year?
He has to be. I think he absolutely has to be in the conversation. I don't know if he'll win it, but just what
Yeah.
he's been able to do from the interior. I mean, it's to me, it's Aaron Donald 1 and then Quinnen Williams 2.
Mhm.
Put himself in that spot. He's been, his first few years in the league a little up and down. There were some nice moments, but couldn't put it together consistently. We finally got that consistent effort from Quinnen Williams, and he looks downright fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. He's been dominant this year. 11 sacks, up there in the league, league lead. I think he was tied with Chris Jones for interior defense lineman with sacks. Um, so he's been phenomenal. Now we go to the rest of the defensive line where we've talked all year long about like the depth at the position. And yesterday it seemed like the depth got tested, without Quinnen Williams to see what, these other pieces on the line can do. And it was definitely, disappointing. Didn't get a sack, didn't get much pressure. Your thoughts on the rest of the defensive line, JFM, Carl Lawson, Bryce Huff, who's been very good this season in the limited snaps that he's gotten. But your thoughts on the rest of the defensive line?
Yeah, I love the depth that they have on the line. I think that's what makes it so impressive. I think JFM is really, solid, just a steady rusher. Bryce Huff is one of the best pass rush specialists. He's not someone who's going to play every down, but put him in on 3rd and long, and he's going to get after the quarterback and be great.
Mhm.
Sheldon Rankins had a nice bounce back spot. Carl Lawson, I think, has been okay. I think I like him a lot, so maybe a little biased there, but he hasn't been the player that he was in 2020 when the Jets signed him. They thought they were going to be getting. I think the injury still kind of the Achilles injury is tough to come back from,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate. I think he's been just fine. He hasn't been great. He hasn't been terrible, but I think overall the depth to that unit is really what makes him so special.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Do you see Carl Lawson on the roster next season?
Ooh, really tough to say. The $15 million is a lot of money, but I don't. That kind of is just opening up another hole for yourself. And if you want to draft offensive tackle early, then
Mhm.
I don't know where you're necessarily filling that other edge spot unless they go to free agency and they don't have a ton of money to spend this year.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It will be interesting to see how that plays out. And then your thoughts on the two rookies, Jermaine Johnson and Michael Clemens, who's obviously got, a good amount of run too on special teams this year. Your thoughts on the two rookies and have you liked what you've seen out of Jermaine Johnson progressing through the season?
Yeah, I have. Edge rushers take a little bit long, and just
Yep.
because he hasn't, played at the level of Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson, I think some
Mhm.
fans are a little bit too hard on him. I think he's been fine. He's been pretty good against the run. He's had a couple nice moments as a pass rusher, but I think he's absolutely trending in the right direction, and I think he'll get better as the years progress.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited to see what he can do. So moving on from the defensive line, we touched a little bit upon the linebackers where, you know, Quincy Williams CJ Mosley, Quan Alexander. Your thoughts on that group as a whole, things you've liked, and some of the things you haven't liked, which definitely includes a little bit of the run game struggles.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love Mosley's leadership that he brings. He's obviously a very smart player out there on the football field. I just think he's kind of lost a step at this point in his career, and it's kind of showing. For Quincy, he runs around and makes a ton of plays, and sometimes it looks great. He comes up, crashes down through the line of scrimmage and makes a
Yep.
huge run, but a little inconsistent there. And Quan Alexander is kind of, I put in a similar boat to Quincy Williams. I just don't think he's consistent enough. So I would anticipate the Jets to look to add linebacker depth in the offseason, whether that be through free agency or in the NFL draft. I think the Jets defense does a really nice job of hiding the linebackers at times because of how good their corners and the pass rush are. But in order for this defense to take the next step, I think they're going to have to continue to add. They've been okay. They haven't been terrible, but
Mhm.
at times they show that they've gotten beat.
Yeah, I agree. So out of the three of them, what do you think they, move on from Quan, keep Mosley, Quincy's still relatively young. How do you see kind of that unfolding in the offseason if they do decide to go upgrade?
Yeah, I think they really like Quincy Williams. So I think they try to keep him around, and obviously with his brother on the team, keep them happy. The two of them together, I think would be a nice story. They might look to get out of CJ Mosley's contract or potentially restructure. I know they just did this past offseason, but that cap hit is gonna, be tough for them.
Mhm.
Quan, I would like to see them bring back Quan and continue to add as well. But with his age and injury history, maybe they just let that one walk. He's been a nice find late in free agency for this team, but for sure could use some upgrades.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It will be interesting to obviously see what they do there, and I could definitely see them going with more youth over maybe going out and spending for a veteran guy in free agency. But we'll see what approach Saleh and Douglas take. Now we go to the corners, which have been phenomenal. I mean, DJ Reed, Sauce Gardner. We'll start with them. They've been dominant. Do you feel this is the start of hopefully a long run with this duo of DJ Reed and Sauce, and throw Michael Carter in there too. He's been very good in the slot.
Yeah, the three of them have been very, very good. Carter struggled a little bit this week, but overall,
Yeah.
the body of work I think has been good from him this year. The duo of Sauce and Reed is fantastic. Reed's still young, so they got him as a free agent, but it's not like he's closer to 30. He's in his mid 20s, so he should be good for a while here. And Sauce is just the sky high potential. As a rookie, he's played 14 games, but he's already, in my opinion, a top 5 corner in this league. Just incredible stuff for him to come in and be this good right away. I was impressed with him coming out of college, but I just didn't think it would have this kind of impact
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah, I totally agree. Do you think he wins Rookie of the Year? Or do you think Tariq Woolen gets in Seattle because of the interceptions?
Yeah, I really hope that it's Sauce
Yeah.
Gardner. I think Tariq Woolen's had a fantastic year. I just don't think he's as good, and that shouldn't be a slight on him. The interception numbers are great, but just pretty much every other coverage stat leans towards Sauce Gardner. So I think he's more deserving.
Yeah, I totally agree. Sauce has been phenomenal this year, and I think he deserves to win Rookie of the Year without a doubt. Um, so now we move on to the safeties, where it's been interesting because you go back to training camp. The cutting of Pinnock was definitely interesting. They keep Joyner. You obviously went out and signed Whitehead in the offseason. Whitehead's been okay. He hasn't, to me, he hasn't impressed me a ton, but I want to hear your thoughts on a safety position that's kind of it's been interesting this season.
Yeah, it's definitely been a little bit interesting. I don't know how I feel about that positional group long term. I think that's probably that's another area that I'd like to see
Mhm.
this team upgrade. I feel like they've had their moments. They've been very up and down so far this year. Some weeks that they look great and you're like, okay, maybe they're turning a corner. And then other times they just really, really struggle. This past week, I think, is one of those times.
Yeah. Do you think Whitehead's a possible long term here, or do you think they'll look to, because he's still relatively young? Uh, or I don't know. I don't know how I feel about Whitehead. Like sometimes in coverage too, I feel like he's not great in coverage either. But I guess, do you feel like he could possibly be long term? And Joyner's definitely not.
No,
Um,
yeah, Joyner's not long term. I
yeah,
think that was a Band-Aid fix for this year. Whitehead, I'd be curious to see. I think that there's a chance that he could be, but that's another one who's just not consistent enough. As I
Yep.
said, some weeks it looks like he's fine. He comes in, makes some big hits, but not the best tackler, and excuse me, can get lost in coverage a little bit too.
Yeah, I tend to agree there. It's it's just been an odd spot without a doubt. So now getting ready for Jacksonville. So we'll go back to the offense side, then we'll go back to the defense side. Your keys on offense. What do the Jets need to do offensively to take down this hot Jacksonville team?
Yeah, I think they need to run the ball better this week. I don't think you want to be put in a spot where you need Zach Wilson to throw to win this game. I don't think that's the recipe for success for this team, which means that Bam Knight and Michael Carter is going to need bounce back games. If Bam Knight's good to go, I know he's a little bit banged up too. And just try to get some easy completions going for Zach. It's easier said than done because he makes the easy things harder, but designed rollouts. I'd like to see him run the ball a little bit more. I think he's effective when he uses his legs. So I think that would be my plan on offense for this week.
Yeah, I agree. Confidence level out of 10. How do you feel in confidence level in Zach this week to go out there and put up solid numbers and not turn the ball over?
Yeah, 5, I guess. I'm not overly confident. I don't
Yeah.
think he's going to be abysmal because I think that defense kind of they're not that great. So similar kind of spot against that he had against Detroit. Just you can't have him do something that loses you the game.
Yep, I agree. So now you go to the defense side of the ball. And it's offense. Trevor Lawrence, 4 touchdowns over the weekend, over 300 yards. He seems to finally be, hitting the groove of why he was the number 1 overall pick. What does this defense need to do? They got a couple good receivers. Zay Jones. They got a good tandem there. Your thoughts on what the defense needs to do, and do you see them applying more pressure this week?
Yeah, I think you have to. I think that's the recipe for success, and hopefully Quinnen's back because it's going to make all the difference in the
Yep.
world. The corners, I'm not worried about. I think they'll be fine. Sauce Gardner has obviously been great. He wasn't targeted last week,
Yep.
so cornerback room, fine. I think it's all about getting pressure. They didn't do that against Detroit, and it hurt them.
Yeah, I agree. So finally, what's your pick for Thursday night game, Jacksonville at home? And then to add on to that, do you see the Jets making the playoffs?
I think the Jets win this week. I'll say 20-17, low scoring, kind of ugly game, but they do enough to get by. I mean, it's going to be challenging, but I do still think they can make the playoffs at 10-7. And maybe even with 9 wins, to be honest with you, because this New England schedule is pretty tough down the stretch here. They have games against the Bills, they have a game against Cincinnati, and they have a game against Miami. So we'll see. Maybe they get some help and the Patriots lose some more of these games, but I think the Jets can win at least 2 or 3 and hopefully sweep.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be interesting. Definitely going to be stressful down the stretch, but this is what we wanted. Meaningful games in December. Much rather this than talking about how a win affects draft position or whatever we've been doing over the past, couple years here. So thanks so much for coming on. Finally here to close things out. Where can everybody find you? Yeah, you obviously got the YouTube channel, podcast. So tell everybody where they can find you, social media, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so on YouTube and all social media at Matt O'Leary NY, we do daily videos and content over there. So be sure to follow along. New podcast episodes drop every Wednesday. And yeah, we like to have a lot of fun, keep it light. So subscribe if you're interested.
Sounds good. Yep. You do a great job. Really enjoy watching you. Also on the Tuesday show too with Ryan and Green Bean. A lot of fun there. So thanks so much for coming on. As always, hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for listening.